All right, thank you so much, Will, for joining us today. Will Thompson is running for District 22 House for the great state of North Dakota. Will prides himself on being North Dakotan born and raised, being an advocate for mental health awareness, and being dedicated to a life of public service. My first question has to do with something that is a very hot topic right now, specifically because it has been in the news the last 4 months. Will, what is your opinion on workers' rights, such as having to work in potential dangerous environments, and also your stance on the idea of a universal paid sick leave?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, let me just say thanks for having me. This is great to be on a platform like this, doing an interview like this. As far as, universal paid sick leave, I think that we've seen throughout this pandemic that it's going to be a necessity in times of crisis for people to be able to stay home if they're sick and still receive a paycheck. North Dakota is one of a handful of states that does not allow that to happen. There's no universal paid sick leave. There's no paid sick leave of any kind. No programs that are put together by the government. There are of course companies that provide some sort of paid sick leave, but it's not mandated and it's not required. I think that we've seen that it's a sticky situation when something like a pandemic comes along. But even when it's not a pandemic, being sick can take a person out of an hourly wage job for several days. And missing several days in this economy, in this culture that we live in, can cause somebody to miss a rent check and suddenly they're behind. And maybe they're behind in a way that they can never catch up in. And so I just personally believe that universal paid sick leave would be an excellent safety net, and it's something that this pandemic has shown is basically essential in the modern environment.
Yes, I agree with you tremendously, and I hope that my hope would be that once we get you elected, that would be one of the many great things that would come out of you being a member of and representing District 22. Yes.
Oh, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood. I hope to do that work.
Yes. Okay. So then, my next question would be that your opponent voted on Senate Bill 2345, which takes away local control and the rights of townships to determine whether they have a hog farm or other factory farms placed on or near their township, allowing the agriculture commissioner to get the final say on where that goes. What is your take on this, and what would you like to change?
Well, there's a couple of ways that my opponents have voted against township control and township rights, and Senate Bill 2345 is the biggest and most visible way. A couple of other ways, just for context, my opponents also voted against measures that would allow cities and townships to set their own minimum wage above state levels. They voted on measures that would not allow cities and townships to set rent control policies or rent increase policies. They even voted against measures that would say whether or not a town can say if they want plastic bags or not in their stores. So clearly, my opponents don't believe that townships, are able to make these local decisions for themselves. But the biggest one and the most visible one is Senate Bill 2345, which overall was not a bad bill. It was an important bill for agriculture. But they did slip in this provision that you talked about, where the ag commissioner can veto any township's decision whether or not to have a hog farm or a factory farm in their area. And we've already seen this happen. The Buffalo area voted against having a hog farm put in about 5 miles outside their city limits. And the ag commissioner said, it doesn't matter. I get to say, and he rammed a hog farm in there anyway. It's already had an effect on the life of the people in Buffalo. Small town, but I mean, these people matter just as much as anybody in rural America. And they're quite upset. The smell is bad from what I hear, and their property value is starting to be affected. So if I were to be elected, I would reverse that part of Senate Bill 2345. I don't believe the ag commissioner should have the ability to just ram a hog farm into your backyard without your consent. I think that if a town says, no, we don't want to change the zoning laws, that they should be listened to in that case. And so it would be a relatively easy fix. And I think there would be the support to do it, considering this part of the bill was kind of just slipped in the back door when it was put in.
Wow, wow, that is something that I'm sure many people are not aware of. and that has a lot of influence.
Yeah, no, you're right. A lot of people aren't aware of it. The people in Buffalo were kind of blindsided by this. They thought that if they got together as a town and said, no, we're going to vote on this and we're going to say no, that'd be the end of it. But all of a sudden, a hog farm got shoved in there and they were pretty much blindsided, yeah.
Wow, that is something. So I guess now we will move on to our next topic. That is very interesting, all of the context going on around with what we were just talking about. But moving on to our next topic, substance abuse treatment is something that I personally believe needs to be discussed more than it actually is. Everyone has a different opinion and a different stance on it. What is your opinion on this, and how do you believe it should be handled?
Yeah, well, I think that first off, we need to recognize that the war on drugs was a resounding failure. And we continue to live with the consequences of that failure, especially Black, Indigenous people of color. And one of the ways I think it really failed is that it was a supply side attack and not a demand side reduction. And so, philosophically, I believe that every problem should be approached from the demand side. Because if you're going to remove supply, it's simple economics. The demand is going to rise and it's going to surpass what supply there is left then. You're doing nothing to decrease the instances of things happening if you remove the supply. You're only hurting the people that are asking for that supply. So we need to focus on the demand side. And so one of the ways for substance abuse that we can focus on the demand side is to focus on substance abuse treatment that is treatment through rehabilitation, like rehab programs, and not through incarceration. I've actually signed on to a resolution for the Youth Delegate Coalition, which is just a bunch of delegates to the Democratic National Convention that are young people under the age of 35. And in part, we're calling for a change of how policing is done around substance abuses. We're looking for substances to be not only decriminalized, but hopefully legalized so that they can be regulated and not be dangerous to those who choose to indulge in them. But at the same time, we need to provide the resources for people that are suffering from addiction to get the help that they need. And this is something that hits home close to me. I've struggled with addiction in my young life, and luckily I was able to get the treatment I needed. But it was extremely expensive, and health insurance didn't necessarily cover it. So we're interested in getting programs put together that provide social workers who can help addicts focus on recovery. That means the social worker is going to focus on, getting employment, getting housing for these people so they can focus on getting clean. And also we're looking for an expansion of coverage so that mental health resources that aren't necessarily always covered by insurance do get covered.
Wow, so I'm glad that you are trying to work with this, and that is something your own personal experience, I believe, you will be able to really show people what this issue is about and try to make a difference in this. And I believe that this is a topic that does not necessarily always get the attention it deserves, but it's something that is just so crucial.
Yeah, no, you're right. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. North Dakota spends less than 5% of their budget for direct human resources in the Health and Human Resources Department. And that 5%, I mean, most of it doesn't go to mental health resources. Most of it doesn't go to substance abuse resources. So it's very little that is spent on these problems that I personally believe are going to define my generation moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. Totally. And then here, my last question is this. On your website, willthompsonnd.com, which everyone needs to check out. Everyone go visit that website after this. I will make sure to leave the link in the description. You discussed stabilizing North Dakota's budget and talked about things such as the plummeting oil prices. What is your opinion on just this whole situation that's going on?
Well, North Dakota's in an intersection of several crises at the moment. We've of course got this pandemic going on, which is causing a health crisis. We also have a farming crisis going on. It's been the worst farming year since at least the '88 season when my dad was a farmer, and that season was the worst since the Dirty 30s. Um, that's a second crisis, but the most pressing crisis right now is this economic crisis. As a state, we put all of our eggs into one basket, and that basket is oil. If the price of oil per barrel falls below $48 a barrel, our budget is not sustainable. It's just not going to work. And I don't know exactly what the price of oil is at right now, but it's definitely below 48. Last time I checked, it was like 22. So it's very much below it. And that's a problem. I mean, moving forward, I think we need to diversify how we are raising money in this country because everybody knows that oil is a boom and bust cycle. The problem is the supermajority Republican side in Bismarck right now, they don't want to acknowledge that a bust is possible, but we're living through a bust right now. So first and foremost, we need to diversify how we are raising money as a state. But also, I believe that we should be taxing oil extraction at a higher level. Before 2015, we taxed it at 5% or at 6.5%. And then after 2016, it got dropped to 5%. And in the time between then, there's been votes to restore it to that 6.5% level. But my opponents have voted against that. And I can say from personal experience that lowering that 1.5%, it does nothing to create jobs out in the oil field. All it does is go straight into the pockets of the oil companies. My dad is an owner-operator out in western North Dakota. And since 2015, he's actually laid people off. His business has what's the opposite of grown? It's contracted. So this money is not going into the pockets of North Dakotans. It's going into the pockets of big oil and the oil companies. So we need to diversify our budget, but we also need to be asking for more money from the oil companies, which make up a large chunk of the budget.
Wow, I was not aware of all that, and I'm sure a lot of people were not as well. And I guess, Will, thank you so much for taking your time to complete this interview. And I wish you good luck in the 2020 election. And we will all be rooting for you moving forward.
Well, thanks, Jack. I appreciate it, and I appreciate this platform.
Yes, yes. Okay, and everyone, make sure you go to willthompsonnd.com. That's correct, right?
Yep, willthompsonnd.com. You can donate straight from the website. You can also join an email list service, or if you want, you can read up on the campaign or contact us directly.
Yes, everyone, go and make sure you do that. It is critical. So thank you.